Welcome. So today we're going to dive into a pretty deep question. How do our thoughts actually come into being? We'll be exploring an idea called generative framing, which is really a way of understanding thinking not as something we just do, but as a living process that we can actually participate in. This right here, this is the core idea we're going to be working with. You see, we're so often focused on the output of our minds, the answers, the solutions, the final conclusions. But what if the real work happens way before any of that? What if the main job of thinking is to create the conditions, the very field from which our thoughts can then emerge?
Now, the word framing, it's probably pretty familiar to you. We usually think of it as the lens we use to make sense of things. It's how we organize meaning, how we decide what a situation is all about. It's an act of interpretation.
And here's where we make a really crucial pivot. We're moving from a passive idea of framing to one that's deeply active. What if the frames we use don't just describe reality, but actually help bring a whole different reality into being? What if they literally change what can happen next in our own minds?
This little comparison really highlights that fundamental shift. See, standard framing asks, what is this? It's all about interpretation. But generative framing asks a different question. What does this allow? It's a move from just organizing meaning that's already there to organizing the very process of becoming. It's a participatory act, not just an observational one.
So how does this even work? Well, it works through what we can call creative variables. And it's so important to get this. These are not levers on a dashboard that we pull to get some specific outcome. Think of them more like the qualities of a field we're cultivating. The quality of the soil, the amount of sunlight, the water. They don't control, but they absolutely shape what's able to grow there.
And here are just a few of those variables. Take orientation. That's just knowing where you are on a process. Are you in a phase of gathering new ideas, or are you in a phase of refining them because you treat thoughts differently in each? Or kindness. That's not just a nice feeling, it's a proactive stance that allows a fragile, new thought to even exist without being immediately shot down by your inner critic. And witness capacity. That's the ability to just observe a rising panic or frustration without getting totally swept away by it. See? These aren't controls, they're the conditions that shape the whole experience.
One of the most powerful ways we influence these creative variables is through metaphor. We tend to dismiss metaphors as just decoration, a bit of poetic flair. But in this context, they're not. They are a fundamental structuring force. The metaphor you use for thinking will literally change the kind of thinking you're able to do.
So for example, if you see a thought as an object, like a brick, well, your goal becomes correctness. You try to fix it, hold it, make it perfect. But what if you see a thought as a living thread? The whole process changes. A thread isn't meant to be fixed, it's meant to be woven, to be followed, maybe even to get a little bit entangled. The goal shifts completely from static correctness to a kind of dynamic coherence and movement.
This brings us to a state that's really challenging for most of us: confusion. Our culture basically treats confusion as a problem. We see mental fog as a failure of the mind, something you need to fix or clear up as fast as possible. But what if that's a total misunderstanding of a vital process?
Alchemy actually has a term for this, massa confusa, the confused mass, and it's understood not as a mistake, but as a necessary phase of dissolution. It's the moment when old, rigid structures break down, so that something entirely new can begin to reorganize and take form. From this point of view, confusion isn't a failure to be corrected, it's a legitimate and even fertile stage of thinking.
And this applies to other difficult states too. In a generative framework, things like fear, resistance, even vulnerability, they aren't seen as obstacles you have to get over before the real thinking can begin. No, they are the raw material. They're the very ingredients that the process of emergence works with, not roadblocks. This completely changes how we think about agency itself. Agency, in this view, isn't about just muscling through with willpower to force an outcome. It's something quieter and honestly more profound. It's a capacity that emerges as we develop an awareness of these creative variables and as we learn to participate with them instead of just trying to control them.
And that really brings us to the final thought here. Generative framing isn't just another tool for your mental toolkit, something you master to be more productive. It's a fundamental shift in your entire posture. It's about cultivating a different kind of relationship with your own mind, one that's less about control and much more about participation, curiosity, and just allowing. So the real question it leaves us with is, what kind of relationship do you want to have with your own thinking process?